Welcome to POTUS 2017, where we keep watch on the Oval Office and pour cold, hard facts on the overheated political rhetoric. I'm Marty Goldenson in for Brian Lehrer. Today, the risky way to boost the steel industry and the shady way to eliminate government regulations. ProPublica reporter Robert Faturechi will be here to tell us about President Trump's deregulators, who are operating largely out of view with some deep industry ties and potential conflicts. But to begin, longtime business columnist Joe Nocera from Bloomberg View will tell us why Trump should be building steel bridges, not trade barriers, to fulfill this promise.
We're going to fight for American workers and American-made steel, and that's beginning immediately. For decades, America has lost our jobs and our factories to unfair foreign trade. And one steel mill after another has been shut down, abandoned, and closed, and we're going to reverse that.
Not an easy reversal. The steel industry employs about 150,000 people in the USA, down about 50,000 from the year 2000. We are a relatively small steel producer, but the world's biggest steel importer. In his Bloomberg View column, Joe Nocera has written that the way President Trump is considering boosting our steel industry, tariffs and quotas, is the dumb way. Welcome, Joe.
Nice to be here.
Good. Why dumb?
Well, there are two core problems. Mm-hmm. The first one is that tariffs and quotas raise prices. So if you put a tariff on steel, you're going to raise the price of a car. Maybe significantly, depending on how big the tariff is.
Yeah, because at the moment, most of the steel that in cars is from abroad.
Yeah, that's right. That's
what,
right.
Like
well,
80% maybe?
Right. Well, I mean, most of the steel in America, if you build a high-rise building, most of the steel is from abroad. Most of the steel that Trump has used in his life to build has come from abroad. I mean, you know, right. It is correct to say that we are a relatively small producer. We produce Nocera, for instance, the largest steel manufacturer, is called a mini mill. They don't make the big old-fashioned kind of fabricated steel that used to be made. They make steel. Yeah,
but suppose it raises the price a little bit, but it means that the American steel mills, which are plenty idle, can go to full production, right?
Well, first of all, they're not plenty idle. They're more like 75 to 80% at capacity.
Well, to make money, they want to be at more capacity, right?
They make money. They want to make more money. You can't blame them for that. And is the world steel subsidized? Probably.
That's what the president means when he says unfair.
That's right.
And explain what unfair would be and whether you think it's really happening.
Well,
the Chinese, for example.
Okay. Well, one way,
steel?
yeah. So one way of quote unquote unfairness is to dump steel, is to sell it for less than it costs you to make. Now, why would anybody do that? Well, one of the reasons they would do it is to keep the mill at capacity, to keep people employed. And because in China, you know, companies don't fail, especially steel companies that are owned by the government, unless the government wants them to fail.
So they're subsidized.
Right. So there's not a big issue.
But is dumping a really big issue? Because we get steel from all over.
Dumping is a small issue. It's not a big issue. Dumping exists, and when you have a dumping case, you go to the World Trade Organization, you have a big fight for a couple of years, the World Trade Organization makes a ruling, and at which point you put a tariff on the steel. Now, one of the things Trump is saying is, I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go. I don't care about the WTO because it's a world organization, and we're just going to care about America here. So I'm just going to slap a tariff on. I'm just going to put quotas on because I want to, because I'm the president of the United States. Now that brings up the second problem, which is that it's a really good way to start a trade war.
Right.
And
what is a trade war?
A trade war is, I put a tariff on your steel. Okay, you put a tariff on our apples. or are this, or are that. And the next thing you know, you have tariffs on everything.
Right, everything's more expensive.
Right, and it's beyond more expensive. It leads to, countries being at each other's throats. It leads to threats. It leads to, not necessarily war, but hostilities of one sort or another. It's not a good thing.
I thought that Congress had the power to levy taxes and things. How come the president can do this?
The president does have a lot of leeway in matters of trade. Not complete leeway, but he does have the right, under the law, if he believes that a country is, cheating America on trade, he does have the right to put a quota on.
But he's using the national security reason, isn't he?
Yes, thank you. That's the excuse.
An excuse.
Yes. So there's a piece in the law that basically says, if national security is at stake, the president can act unilaterally without having to go to Congress or without having to go to the WTO or do any of those other things.
Right.
So, a lot of things get built in this country under that rubric.
Really?
When we think about the interstate highway system, which is one of the most valuable infrastructure assets the United States has ever built, was sold to the country by Eisenhower as a national security measure in case there was an atomic war.
And then we could drive to the other part of the country that wasn't glowing in the dark.
That's right.
How useful.
Yes. Now, I'm glad he did it because it's probably better that we have highways than not.
Oh, sure.
So here's an example of Trump basically saying, I'm going to use that same rationale to slap tariffs on steel.
So what's the cure? What should he do instead of tariffs and quotas?
Well, what he should have done.
Right, 6 months into the administration, it's too late for something?
It may be. Given the fiasco of healthcare, you wonder how they'll get anything else done.
All right.
But imagine that he, instead of starting with healthcare, which was turned into such a fiasco, suppose he started with infrastructure.
Right.
And suppose that he had said, I'm going to implement the $1 trillion infrastructure program that I promised the American people from day one, and that's going to give lots of people jobs, and it's going to create, lots of use for steel and for cement and for all sorts of other things, products that we can make in America, and that would have been a really smart way.
He would have got Democratic support,
right.
maybe more than Republican support.
And he would have had Democrats in his pocket on that, and it would have made it much easier going forward on tax reform. This is sort of a side point, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Sure.
A lot of people said Obama made a big mistake starting with health care, making that his first thing.
Yes.
In the end, it's turned out to be his legacy. Well, Trump really did make a terrible mistake starting with health care.
Right.
And he would have been much better served starting with something, much more popular infrastructure, and it would have brought him a lot closer to certain goals that he enumerated during the campaign, such as jobs and...
Would $1 trillion of infrastructure with steel and cement and whatever create 1 million jobs, which is the number he thought it would?
It wouldn't create 1 million jobs. It would create 100,000, 150,000. It's not an insignificant number. And also, though infrastructure jobs are good-paying jobs, and they require some skill, some construction skill, and so on. And it's the kind of job that the country really has lost.
Right.
And when he talks about bringing the steel industry back, what he's really talking about, in a larger sense, is bringing back those dirty hand, well-paying, middle-class jobs that we think about so fondly from the 1950s and the 1960s, but that have really evaporated in the country.
Right, I get it. Would it require some kind of incentives if he did that, or did that next, to use American steel? Would you have to build into the infrastructure?
Sure, you probably would. It wouldn't be that hard. I mean, you could say that a certain percentage of the products used for this bridge would have to be American. He has every right to do that, and you would, or you could have tax incentives if you use American products. You get a tax break of some sort. Yes, you would, because steel abroad remains cheaper than, in most cases, than American steel.
Let's talk politics. Could the president get this through, this whether it be a tariff or a quota on steel. Where do the politics lie? Where do the left and the right sit on this?
It's pretty confused, actually. In general, the right, Republicans, free marketeers, would be opposed to it, and Democrats and the left generally would be in favor of it. But because it's Trump,
right,
it's quite possible that it would be just the opposite, and the Democrats would oppose it, and many Republicans would be in favor of it. Now, I should also note that corporations themselves are divided on this. General Electric is in favor of some kind of tariff or quota system, not necessarily on steel, but generally speaking, the idea of a NAFTA, for instance, that has quotas built into it or tariffs.
Why are they for it? GE?
They think it will help them. You know, they're an international company. They're not really U.S. based for that matter. To them, it's not that big a deal, and it allows them to support the price. Whereas Walmart, which depends on low prices, cares a lot about this. And Walmart's basic position is, you know, we can't have this, and we will fight this to the death.
Right, right. Well, either the president's got to switch parties, or he's going to have trouble with this, as he's had trouble with health care.
Well, sure, but now, okay, so he's had trouble with health care. Now they're moving to tax reform. They're going to have trouble with tax reform. That's going to be a big fight. Infrastructure remains the single easiest thing he could do. But
well, I don't know why you say that, because that's spending a lot of money, and Republicans don't like to spend money. So why do you say it's easiest?
Well,
they don't
like to spend money when it's a Democrat in the White House. I mean, they were furious about Obama's $800 billion infrastructure bill, which came, I mean, my God, after the worst financial crisis, you know, and so on and so forth. We were in the Great Recession, and it seemed pretty necessary. I mean, right now we have unemployment that's under 5%. It's actually much less necessary, but business was very excited about this infrastructure plan. And there were, I don't know if you know this, the stocks of the steel companies actually went up for a while.
Yes.
Built purely around this idea that infrastructure thing was going to happen. And so when business gets behind something, Republicans tend to get behind it.
Right, and they don't need that many Republicans because the Democrats are going to go for it.
And Republicans really don't care. They care much less about spending issues when Republicans in the White House. They've proven this over and over and over, you know, with Bush and so on. And Democrats, I think, would be in favor of it because it creates jobs and middle-class jobs.
Even though it gives the president a victory,
even though it would give the president
he would pick up a few Democratic votes would be enough to put it over the top.
I think it could really, I think it still could happen, but if he keeps putting other things that are tougher in front of it, it gets harder and harder and harder to do.
Joe, stick with us. We're going to move on, and around the issue of deregulation, bring on some additional evidence. Time for evidence-based politics, where we pour cold hard facts on the overheated political rhetoric. Remember President Trump ordering each federal agency to form a deregulation task force to reduce or eliminate government regulations? Well, it's happening. Deregulation has remained a priority.
I will keep working with Congress, with every agency, and most importantly with the American people, until we eliminate every unnecessary, harmful, and job-killing regulation that we can find. We have a lot more coming. It's going to be happening.
Finding out exactly who is on those deregulation task forces and what they're up to is a major journalistic challenge. But ProPublica's Robert Faturechi, in collaboration with New York Times' Danielle Ivory, has unearthed quite a few names and discovered that some of these deregulators have deep industry ties and apparent conflicts of interest. Robert, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Joe Nocera remains with us to do color commentary. So, how hard is it to find out, and why is it hard to find out who within an agency is in charge of deregulation?
So when we started investigating this, I mean, we thought the hard part would be figuring out what their industry ties were, what their financial holdings were, what their potential conflicts of interest were. But we were surprised to find out that it was difficult just to figure out, in a lot of instances, who these people even were. We had agencies that would give us no names. We had others that initially redacted names.
And give you titles but no names, right?
Or titles and no names.
So what'd you do?
So, a different tactic with each agency. For the redactions, we appealed the FOIA. That was successful.
Right, the FOIA being getting a public record, your right, suing for a public record, essentially, or appealing.
Right, appealing. For other agencies, we reached out to sources, not the people who are, not the public information officers, but folks within the agencies, trying to get answers that way.
What do you make of that secrecy, or partial secrecy anyway?
I mean, it's a public task force doing the public's business. It didn't quite make sense to me that the public shouldn't be able to know who these people are. I mean, typically these kinds of exemptions where names aren't included, this is typically for law enforcement personnel, folks in sensitive positions. I mean, this is not that, so that was surprising.
Did they give you a rationale? And what did they say when they said, we're not going to tell you the name?
Well, for most agencies, it was radio silence. In the case where they redacted the names in the response,
That's where they're crossed out on the FOIA.
Yeah, just crossed out. They use this exemption that, again, is typically used for law enforcement personnel. It's a privacy exemption, and in this case, it makes no sense.
So how many appointees did you finally get names of?
The total was around 70.
And how many in that group seem to have some kind of either conflict or...
About a couple dozen, and it
Really?
It depends on, we had different groups. So we had a couple folks who could have potentially profited if certain regulations were changed. We had others who had worked for industry groups or other employers who, interact with the agencies. Those folks are now...
Right, that's what you mean by a conflict, that they came right from some industry or had previously somehow represented it, or were came from an agency that was funded by people who might be affected by new regulations.
Right, exactly.
Let's be less abstract. Tell me about Syngenta. It's a good example, I think.
Sure. So one of the appointees at the Department of Interior, he had founded a nonprofit that was funded by pesticide maker Syngenta. One of his first meetings upon entering government and getting a job at the Department of Interior was for a top lobbyist for Syngenta. And if you look at, they didn't tell us, they refused to tell us what they were meeting about, but if you look at Syngenta's lobbying disclosures, you can see they're quite active on trying to change the Endangered Species Act.
Right, they want to change it. They make what? Syngenta.
Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, all the, they're a major pesticide maker.
Right. Another example?
So another example that I find interesting, you've got one of the appointees at EPA. He is married to a top lobbyist for an oil company that is regulated by EPA. She was lobbying EPA last year, the spouse that is, and a trade group that her company is a member of is currently lobbying her husband's deregulation group. We tried to get an understanding from the agency about whether he'd be recusing himself from issues related to that trade group, and they declined to answer.
Did anybody recuse themselves of the list you looked at? Are recusals common?
Sure, it is something that some agencies have done. So, for example, an appointee at HUD had up to $50,000 stake in a company that, is sort of a marketplace for single-family home rental investors.
Right, she's no longer with the agency, though.
Right, so she's no, and they made her agree that she would not meet or give advice to that company that she came from, that she would recuse herself from that.
But what do you say about the argument that, all right, so all these people may not be the environmentalists you wish were meeting with the EPA or with the Interior Department, but these are people who are close to business, know business, have represented business. That's just a different politic. That's more Republican. It's Trump. Am I going too light on this? Or is there some sort of more nefarious way to look at it?
So, I mean, as straight news reporters, and I'm not saying this disingenuously, I mean, there are a lot of folks who believe that if you come from industry or an expert on the regulations affecting that industry, our goal was not to show whether the regulations that are going to be rolled back are good or bad, or whether having close ties is good or bad. It was to let the public know how close these ties are in many instances, and let them decide if these are people they feel comfortable with.
Right, which is to say, pour some sunlight on it, right? But Joe,
there's a very high-profile example of this, which is Carl Icahn. Where he's like the president's right-hand deregulator. And who knows what he's really doing, but I don't know the details of the case, but there was a regulation that he immediately started to go after that would have affected one of his companies and allowed them to make more money. So it was, the conflict is the regulation truly unnecessary, or is it actually a good regulation that's necessary that Carl Icahn wants to get rid of because it'll line his pockets?
Right.
That's the core conflict, which
Sure.
One could say that's the core conflict at the White House, too.
Education Department. Do we know who's there?
Yeah, they've got quite a large task force there, and you've got some career staffers who have been there both in Democratic and Republican administrations, and then you've got folks who have either worked for or consulted for for-profit college operators.
That's Bob Eitel, is it?
He's one example.
Right. Worked for profit-making colleges, right?
Right. As it was, being regulated by the agency he's now at and facing,
Right.
Pretty serious allegations.
Right. So, if that regulation changes, it may not benefit him personally, but the world he was in.
Sure, his former employers.
Seems to me that this creates a whole new way into government for lobbyists or for corporations. Have you come across that?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a rush now to get to the front of the line, right? Because these regulations can take years to finalize, or
Sure.
regulations, and so you want to get them to the front of the line and have enough time to make sure that a friendly administration is in place for the entire course of this process. So yeah, folks are hiring lobbyists, they're hiring attorneys, economists. They're basically spending a lot of money so they can make their case before the agencies, and the agencies can use those cases as a basis to take action.
What's that mean for the democracy, Joe?
Nothing especially good, I suppose. I guess I would say that it's really, we're in an environment now, and we have an administration now that is very open to this idea of, in effect, he wouldn't say it this way, but I would say subverting the agencies that were, set up to protect the environment and so on and so forth. And that has not been the American tradition, and one hopes that it will not again be the American tradition. But right now it's something that we all have to deal with, and that journalists like Robert have to investigate.
Speaking of people inside, there are probably people inside all those agencies who are appalled that things are changing, that the role of the EPA would be to deregulate rather than regulate more or enforce regulations. Have you heard from, and don't say who or where, but you guys are trying to get more names and understand more deeply what's happening. It's an ongoing bit of research that you're doing for the ProPublica and the Times to find out more about the Trump deregulation plan. You put out a kind of a call to people to contact you if they knew more names and more information. Anything come in since this article was published, just 10 days ago or so, right?
Fewer, I think, yeah. So we've set up an email address, taskforce@propublica.org. Our staff has actually created targeted Facebook ads to federal government employees, because those are the folks who are going to be in the know here. And yeah, we've started to hear from folks within the agency. Hopefully that'll continue, and this isn't going to be our last look at these groups.
From the Trump side of things, I'm sure they feel like, we're finding some way to weaken the permanent government by putting these deregulators in there. And then, so there's a little war going on. Maybe the permanent government people are contacting you and they're trying to deregulate. Is that a little bit of a war going on?
Yeah, I mean, as far as people's motivations for contacting us, I mean, and I'm sure you could agree, it varies. I mean, I've had folks who are doing it because it's for the public good. You know, that's almost always at least a percentage of the motivation. Sometimes the motivations can seem quite strange or self-involved.
Sure.
You know, it's not the motivations that we care about. I mean, I think that folks who talk to journalists are doing a public service typically, and you know, we appreciate any information we can get.
You know, the bureaucracy does not open itself up easily. And you have all these reporters reporting on the White House and the people at the top of the administration, and that's not unimportant. But what's going on in these agencies and the remarkable degree to which it's secretive is incredibly important to the country and may have more lasting effect on the country. And it's really important for organizations like ProPublica and the New York Times and the Washington Post and Bloomberg to work the agencies and find out what's going on inside them and find out, you know, what the pushback is and what the new regulations are going to be and what the deregulatory thrust is going to be. And I just really can't think of anything more important that journalists in Washington can be doing right now.
Thank you. Final question for you, Robert, which is do you get the impression when you see this people trying to deregulate that in fact there's just too much regulation out there and some of it is legitimate? I know other presidents have tried to cut down on regulations. I think there was one that I think President Clinton did on the consistency of grits.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you see too much?
You know, I mean, if you listen to the left, it's already been cut to the bone, and there are no regulations left to cut. If you listen to the right, they're endless. I mean, we're talking about huge bureaucracies with thousands of rules. Certainly, some of them are going to be less effective than others. I think it really just depends on what your philosophy is as far as how involved government should be in the inner workings of business and in the protections of the public.
This is all we have time for, but I'm sure the transparency is the key, and that should help. Thank you for coming, Joe. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's POTUS 2017 for today. We're here each week at this hour pouring cold, hard facts, or trying to, on the overheated political rhetoric. Brian Lehrer returns next week. I'm Marty Goldenson. Thanks for watching.